It's now been a significant fraction of my life, living, so to speak, on Mars.
Absolutely. Well, that's pretty cool. I know if I was your kid, I would think I'd have a pretty cool dude as a dad. And in some ways, you're making the rest of us fathers kind of look bad. You got an asteroid named after you. You're a French knight, and you get to vaporize rocks on Mars. So that's pretty cool. I'm joking, but I really it's an impressive deal, and I'm sure your family and your kids are really proud of you. I mean, you do all sorts of things that many of us can't even really fully understand. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but I'll just say that being a good dad is really the most important.
Yeah,
it's the thing that's going to endure, and so that has to happen. Whether the other stuff happens or not, is actually negotiable.
Today, we are blessed to be talking with Dr. Roger Wiens. Born and raised in Mountain Lake, Minnesota, now working for NASA and living in Los Alamos, New Mexico, Roger and his beautiful wife, Gwen, have two sons, Carson and Isaac. For many decades, Dr. Wiens has been on the front lines of many significant NASA missions and has received numerous awards for his contributions to science. Early in his career, Dr. Wiens performed critical roles with NASA's Genesis mission, first to return to Earth from beyond the moon, helping us learn more about the sun. And more recently, he served as a leader with NASA's Curiosity and Perseverance Mars Rover missions, directing efforts with the ChemCam and SuperCam laser instruments to help study and learn about the red planet. In addition to a Mars focus, Roger has been involved in other missions to include studying the moon and comets. An active writer and speaker, every year Dr. Wiens presents scores of public talks and publishes dozens of papers. You can learn more about him and his story by reading his book, Red Rover, Inside the Story of Robotic Space Exploration from Genesis to the Mars Rover Curiosity. It was published in 2013 and available on Amazon. Good day, Dr. Wiens. Thank you for taking the time today to share your journey, the extremely interesting roads you've traveled during your accomplished career. I really appreciate you breaking free from your critical role on the Mars operation shift to have this conversation.
Thanks, Dan. It's a privilege and great to get to know you and to talk more about where we came from.
Fabulous. Although I'd of course prefer to be interviewing you in person, perhaps on the edge of Mountain Lake, on a picnic table in a park, enjoying a root beer float from the local A&W restaurant. But here we are enjoying this experience via a video call. Of course, not preferred, but we all need to be most thankful for smart people like yourself who have made such experiences possible. So thanks so much. So Roger, to get started here, your sons, Isaac and Carson, what do they think is cooler? That their dad has an asteroid named after him? That their dad is a French knight? Or that their dad gets to use a laser to blow up things on Mars? Which is cooler for them?
Well, I think the last one, just because that's what I do every day, and it just kind of goes on and on. We got on the first rover, Perseverance. The Curiosity. Get them mixed up now. Almost 10 years ago, and then we got on contract with NASA to build our next instrument, SuperCam, and so we knew this day would come when the landing would happen. Whether it landed successfully or not is always a big question. And now we're on to the exploration part, and so it just kind of goes on and on. I mean, it's now been a significant fraction of my life, living, so to speak, on Mars.
Absolutely. Well, that's pretty cool. I know if I was your kid, I would think I'd have a pretty cool dude as a dad. And in some ways, you're making the rest of us fathers kind of look bad. You got an asteroid named after you. You're a French knight, and you get to vaporize rocks on Mars. So that's pretty cool. I'm joking, but it's an impressive deal, and I'm sure your family and your kids are really proud of you. I mean, you do all sorts of things that many of us can't even really fully understand. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but I'll just say that being a good dad is really the most important.
Yeah,
it's the thing that's going to endure, and so that has to happen. whether the other stuff happens or not, is actually negotiable in terms of their own lives. And that's so anyway. But since you
Yeah.
mentioned it,
I like, yeah, your legacy beyond this world is important, which you'll have. But boy, that legacy through the generations, through your kids, and your fingerprints that you put on their lives, that is truly a lasting legacy. Um, of all the cool things you've done, though, and you've met some fascinating people in some really neat places around the world. Um, what stands out the most to you, or maybe even what's your wife the most proud of when she introduces you? What are some of the cool things that she uses to introduce her husband?
oh gosh, that's a tough question. Like I said, first of all, I think we have to be a family person, and the love and respect that we give to those around us are actually the most important. And then beyond that, of course, yes, our spouses, our families are proud of the extracurricular things that we do. Yeah, and so we've got to have a lot of great experiences going out to the Cape to watch the launches. Working some of the time in France with our French colleagues who are partnering with us on these missions. Those things are really fun. And add a lot to our lives for sure, and have been very special. So yeah, she knows that I've got this family, so to speak, of people in many places in France and Spain and Denmark and other places, as well as around the U.S. And they're all part of the teams that I developed to get these instruments working on the Mars rovers. But it makes a great, it's part of our social life, and as well as what we do for our career. And so, of course, those two mix.
Yeah, take your sons to work day. That's pretty nice for your kids to go to Cape and watch a launch or something like that. That is a pretty neat deal, and to have that time together and to talk about it, I'm sure it is a wonderful setting on many fronts. But that's great that it's nice. Just you can just see after a few minutes how humble you are and how family focused you are. That's obviously a trait that's stuck with you and helped be part of your success.
Well, when I went into this career, I mostly only knew about single people or people that just didn't have families, and so I didn't know going in if it's possible to really be a family person and do this. And I can tell you it's challenging because the siren call of trying to be successful, if that's a real priority. I almost fell into this job in a sense, and so it was a little bit different for me. But yeah, it's it is good when both can happen.
Absolutely. I guess sometimes it's how do you define success in many ways? Is it that professional experience and the resume that maybe one would have, or is it that legacy you have with your family, those times that you have with the family? And if you can balance them, which you obviously have, boy, that's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would even say, success is something that we want to measure at God's level, and so that's where success really counts, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Could you just educate us a bit who maybe know just a little bit about, okay, yes, we've got this rover, this mission to go to Mars, but maybe I know you've had your hands in the initial Genesis, which had to do with the moon and something else, and then or beyond the moon, but then you went into the Curiosity and the Perseverance. What is it that you were studying, and why is that such a momentous accomplishment in many ways to have that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I prepared, like I said, it was a bit serendipitous, or as I like to say, providential, that I got into this work. I did not know what I'd be doing. I loved space as a kid, and so my brother and I built a telescope to look at the features on Mars. As it came close to Earth one time when I was 11 years old. And we built model rockets and things like that. But I didn't think I would be doing this kind of thing for a career. I really honestly didn't. But I went to college. I majored in physics and thought I'd go into engineering actually, but my four-year college, Wheaton College near Chicago, didn't have an engineering degree at that point, and I got thoroughly enmeshed with some of the extracurricular activities there. Didn't want to leave, so I stuck with physics, which is what I was able to do there, and then ended up going to graduate school at the University of Minnesota, where I started studying these meteorites that we have on Earth that were very different from most of the meteorites. These rocks that we end up with falling through the sky. These ended up proving to be rocks that had fallen from Mars, and so again, just kind of this pattern in my life, and I still didn't think I was going to do this for a career. I thought maybe I'd go teach in a third world university or in some way get involved in some kind of relief work somehow, but it just didn't end up that way. And so then I was ended up in Caltech after that, and then came to Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, where I am now, and all on some physics degrees, but mostly doing something that's more related to geology in a sense, something that I've learned along the way, and then also how to build the instruments and developing them. And kind of the cool thing is that I get to do both. I'm not stuck with one particular thing in my career. I kind of get to do both the hey NASA, we should do this kind of thing, and then building that kind of thing, and then actually working with a team to work on what we're exploring with these tools. In this case, in the last dozen years, this laser type of instrument that fires from the top of the rover down onto the ground to detect what is the composition of the rocks and the soils around the rovers.
You really are leading on the cutting edge of so much technology. But you're saying when you started at 10, 11 years old, what kind of your first rocket? When did you fire your first rocket, and what kind of technology was that? And how did you learn? How were you exposed to that back in your time?
Yeah, well, I think this dates me a little bit because when I grew up in Mountain Lake, there was no internet. And so if you think about the information that's available to a person at that point in time, it was basically the public library, the schools, whatever we could consume, the newspapers or any magazines that we would get, or what you could see on TV or hear on the radio. And so my brother, Doug, 2 years older than me, and I both had this interest in science. We would look at some of the things like popular mechanics in the public library, and they had advertisement for fly your own model rockets. So we sent for a catalog, and I think this was when I was getting out of third grade. And by the time I was in fourth grade, I think we had built and launched our first model rocket out of our backyard. And we were hooked on the idea and just wanted to build a whole bunch more rockets, try 2 and 3 stage rockets, try to get a camera on the rocket. And we eventually did all of that. We made a darkroom because in those days you used film for photographs. And so we got a darkroom in our basement bathroom and started developing the pictures we took from our rockets.
That's awesome. So it wasn't just flying rockets. There was a lot of other technology went into it as well. The cameras, the communications of it. You had to be resourceful trying to find this. You got to have the intellect as well and kind of that passion. So that's, and your brother, you said your brother Doug, you both shared the same passion and purpose. That's pretty cool. The two of you did.
Yeah, I think he was the creative one, and being he was older, he also I think was a bit more brainy than me as well. And so he'd get these ideas, and I would be his cohort in these different ideas. Also things like, okay, we were interested in getting a chemistry set, and we actually did little magic shows for the neighborhood kids with pouring solutions in test tubes and making them fume or change color or all of those things. So just a lot of different little things that were kind of all science-y. I think I mentioned building the telescope as well. So those were the things we did as kids, along with all the other things that kids do.
If I recall correctly, in reading your book, there was an incident where you essentially put explosives into space too. And whose idea was it to soak the tissue paper in gasoline and fly it? Was that yours or Doug?
Oh, gosh, I couldn't remember that at this point. We were both gung-ho about it. Of course, we shouldn't be talking about this in a sense because we don't want people to blow themselves up.
Don't do that. Yeah, it's on YouTube. Don't do it.
Right. We did try to make some gunpowder, but we were, of course, very careful when we were trying to light it or anything like that. So we were never anywhere close. So we did try to put some homemade gunpowder in the rockets as well at times. But then I think we had the most fun with gasoline-soaked tissue. Never do this in a dry place because you could set your neighborhood on fire, of course. But in a wet environment where you have plenty of rain, not like here in New Mexico, you could do a little bit of that. And so we watched some of that burning tissue float across the night sky after launches. But I think the best thing was actually taking pictures of our neighborhoods from overhead and those kinds of things. So yeah.
Do you still have those pictures you took?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, occasionally somebody will ask me to tell what I did growing up, and I'll throw a picture or two of that in and just say, well, my first pictures from a rocket were not recently; they were a long time ago. So yeah,
absolutely. That is really neat. Kind of reminds me of what's that movie October Sky with Homer Hickam. A little bit of that, little different experience with your dad, but but very similar. Just having that love and passion as a young boy. That's great.
Yeah, I've been in touch actually with Homer Hickam. Now he had quite a different situation because they were in a slightly earlier era where they didn't have the commercial model rockets you could buy and build, and so they came up with and developed their own rocket engines. And that's quite a bit beyond what we did, which was to buy these. And of course, we did innovate a little bit with them, with the cameras and other things. But yeah, and so there are a lot of different models we could just buy, and you can still do that today and have a lot of fun. Yeah.
How about if I recall correctly, it was in the 4th grade time frame. So right around that same time frame, you also had a fascination for astronomy. I think you built a telescope, and you had to meet your first deadline to make the right shot with Mars and Earth kind of overlapping, and so you get that good shot of the red planets. I don't know if that started with your love affair with Mars as well. If you just kind of talk about that time period in your life too, and the fascination for astronomy and how that kind of came together with all the other science.
Yeah, it was the same time period actually. But yeah, we weren't doing rockets; we were thinking about astronomy. But anyway, so I mean, when we were kids, we got some telescope, and it was one of these that you could buy, and it's kind of small telescope, but it has a tripod and an eyepiece and all of that. And we kind of said, well, this is kind of neat, but we need something bigger and better. So I think my brother was really at the forefront of this, but figuring out that if you get some big telescope, you can really do a lot of cool things looking at the planets. Most of these are reflecting telescopes, the bigger ones, and so they use a mirror. We were trying to figure out how to make this mirror that it's got a parabolic surface to it, and thought a lot about actually grinding our own mirror, polishing it ourselves, and so on. I think one of the best decisions we ever made was to not do it ourselves, but to buy one of the somewhat less expensive ones. And so we did that. But yeah, if you can buy whole telescopes, and we could at that time, that are bigger, but we knew that we could actually save a lot of money by buying some components and putting it together. So we bought the mirror, we bought the eyepieces, and we bought a mount. We didn't. We had a paper route. We served our northeast corner of Mountain Lake with the paper route, and that money went towards getting the rockets and this telescope. We didn't have enough money to buy the tube, but it turns out you can make a telescope just with the optical elements, and if it's a dark enough night and you don't have a lot of reflections around, you can use it just mounting that on a plywood board. So that's what we did first of all, and we didn't get a tripod, so we actually put a fence in the ground in the backyard and mounted on that. The tube did come later, and that actually came by train to the Mountain Lake train depot. I think it was one of the last times that depot was used for certainly for anything scientific like that. But it kind of tells how long ago this was. But we got this telescope mounted on the fence post before it even had the tube, just with the mirror mounted at one end and the eyepiece and then another at the other end. And we'd take it out there, and our deadline, as you say, was the close approach of Mars. It was the same year that Mariner, I think it was Mariner 9, arrived at Mars, and it was the first spacecraft to ever orbit Mars. And Mars, being the next planet out from Earth, has times when it passes Earth, or when Earth passes Mars in their orbits. And Mars will come within about 30 million miles, if we're lucky, of Earth. The other times it'll be like right now, it's almost behind the sun from Earth at 270 million odd miles away now. So that's a relatively close 30 million miles. And so we were pleased to try to get observations of it then. And when it's that close, you can see features on Mars. And these are actually some of the same features that Percival Lowell had looked at 70 years earlier, thought he had seen canals and all of this. And we'd never had a spacecraft in orbit around Mars yet, so we didn't really know what Mars was like. So there was a lot of interest. We could, during that close approach of Mars, see the polar caps on one pole growing and the cap on the other end shrinking. We could see different features like Syrtis Major, which is actually now where our instrument is on the Perseverance rover. It was just a kind of a big, dark, sort of boot-shaped object in a sense. But we got those kind of details from our 6-inch reflecting telescope that we built and took outside at night and put on a fence post. And we did make sketches. I wish I had those sketches today. We somehow lost that sketchbook. So anyway, that was what we did with that deadline for astronomy. We also looked at a lot of other things as well. But yeah.
And this is a bit of foreshadowing there as an 11-year-old of what you're going to be studying for your later on career with NASA. You've spent how many years now studying Mars from your current perch? But a lot of foreshadowing there as a 10, 11-year-old.
Yeah, surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about your brother, Doug? I think you referred to him as your quality control engineer at the time. What's he doing? What career field did he go into? Did he have a similar route to you?
Yeah, he went into graduate school after going to college. He went in geophysics, Northwestern University near Chicago, and became a seismologist. So he has studied earthquakes around the globe. He has and he uses those earthquakes and the waves that they generate in the interior of the Earth to understand a lot of the features of the Earth's mantle and the interior of the Earth. But that study has taken him to many places. He's been in just about every continent. He has been at the South Pole as well as other places in Antarctica to study earthquakes there and put seismographs down. He's been in the South Pacific Islands. He's been in Asia, Africa, South America, and then he also did a study of the Mid-Continent Rift in Minnesota, in central Minnesota, so in south central Minnesota. So he's covered a very fascinating field, and especially the way it's taken him around the globe to study it. And so we didn't know we'd go into sort of parallel science fields, but we certainly did.
You two have some very interesting conversations over the holiday dinner table.
A little bit.
And
Yeah. And so his position actually has been a professor and also department chair at Washington University in St. Louis for many years.
That's great. Well, your parents did something right for the two of you to go on and have this type of success. So kudos definitely to them.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
1968 December was an important time in your life and for space exploration in general. And it was interesting in your book, you kind of talked about those 3 days before Christmas where you kind of had an emotional roller coaster of experiences with some anticipation and excitement for the launch of the Apollo 8? I think it was. It was supposed to happen over Christmas time. That was the first mission to the moon. And then the realities of kind of what happened with the medical situation with your brother, and then kind of the realities of a Minnesota winter too. I don't know if you could just kind of describe that setting for you and your family in the context of the greater setting of space exploration in the late 60s as well. So this is December of 1968, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I was a bit younger at that time, but we were pretty rambunctious boys. By the way, I have a sister as well who is 6 years younger than me. So at that time, she was a 2-year-old. So my family had their hands full, so I don't know why or how this happened, but my brother developed a stomach ulcer. So we didn't know what was happening, of course, but it was getting close to Christmas time, and we had the launch of the Apollo 8 mission, which I don't know. I should have been looking at my book recently to bone up on these things, but apparently you have. But it was just within the week before Christmas, and we were going to watch the launch of this first Saturn rocket mission that was going outside of Earth's orbit and kind of just going for broke. They didn't have this well tested yet, but NASA was going to send these 3 astronauts and literally shoot the moon. And so we were going to watch this. There was no way we were going to miss this historic, huge launch. And so we had set our clocks to get up. I think, actually, I should say my brother had set his clock. I don't know, as an 8-year-old, if I was even setting clocks those days. And we were in the same bedroom. So I just expected to get awoken the next morning and run upstairs and on our black and white TV to watch this launch. I woke up and something was very wrong because it was much later and the sun was streaming into the window, and my brother wasn't there. And so I ran upstairs to find out what happened. And my mother said that my brother Doug had been taken to the hospital. And so this ulcer had manifested itself, and he had to get taken into care. To make a long story short, he came back several days later. I missed the launch, but it was a traumatic time for me because, here's my brother who was my life at that point. Because we were so close in age, we shared a bedroom, all of that. We had all of these interests together, and he was in the hospital. I think I even got sick that day as well, just out of sympathy. And then I think, I don't know for sure in my book, I think I said there was snow. I think there was definitely snow that week, and I just can't remember all of the details of that. But anyway, he came home several days later, and it was just the day, I'm pretty sure it was the day that the astronauts got to the moon, 3 days later. And so we were watching all around the table, and he was with us. I think he was like wrapped in a blanket or something. And we're watching these astronauts from the moon. It was really, really something.
What an impactful experience that was. And as I said, with the emotional roller coaster, the excitement, and then, what's happening to my brother? And then for you two to share that moment together, him back from the hospital, that's That's fabulous. Thank you. What type of impact would that have on you and your future then? I mean, just seeing those astronauts and Walter Cronkite and having that television um, setting, talking about them, and them talking to the world in addition to our country, and talking down to Roger and Doug in Mountain Lake. What type of impact did that have on you, do you think, in your career path?
That was hugely inspirational, I think, for a whole generation. That, and of course, the Apollo missions that followed it and the ones that preceded it with Gemini and Mercury. I think that in a sense, NASA has it right because they know that they are also here to not just to explore, but to inspire all of us with what we as humans can do in learning about our universe. I remember the astronauts in Apollo 8 read from Genesis, the account in the Bible at that time. I think that was, we were really cheering for that too, just to understand that we were exploring a new part of creation with this mission, and that was pretty cool. It was hugely inspiring.
Could just transition a bit to your story, being from a small town, and then going into a kind of a small lake, maybe a big fish, smart guy in a small setting, in a small lake, and then you talked about going on to Wheaton and U of M, then to Caltech, where there are smart scientists everywhere. Maybe just talk about what are some of the advantages you had being from a small town and having that upbringing, some of the disadvantages and the obstacles you've had to encounter, and what's it like to be surrounded by the smartest people in the world, and got to be intimidating at first, but now here you are as and inviting other people onto these teams and leading these teams of super smart people.
Yeah. Southwest Minnesota was competitive. Growing up in the Mountain Lake school system at that time, anyway, I didn't feel like I was towering above the others at all. I really didn't. We were just all a lot of us were just enjoying learning together, and in fact, one of my close colleagues here now at the lab, who led the electronics development for our instruments, is also from just 30 miles away from where I grew up. So it's
Where's that?
Great. I'm just trying to remember.
No, okay, that's fine.
Right
down there in the southwest corner there.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Two of you.
Yeah, Tony Nelson.
Okay.
He's from this part of the country as well. And I was just going through some of my. I kept a journal back then, actually, and I just scanned part of it in and recently, and just looking at it, and I was looking at my grades and getting B's and C's at some times, but really loving the math and the science classes that I had, and the music as well. And so I went to Wheaton College, which is a private four-year college in the Chicago area after high school. And I was really drawn to that place because it seemed quite competitive, and also very well-rounded. I love music. Many people thought I was going to go into music. I was able to join an all-male choir there that I did, I think, 200 some concerts with, many of them almost 100 in Europe and other places. So we just did a lot of fun things, but I also really enjoyed the science there. I got to actually run an observatory for local schools and other people with, I think, a 16-inch telescope there. So just, a lot of fun stuff. It was actually hard for me my freshman year to go into physics there, just because some of the background that people had from the big schools I had not had. So an introduction to calculus, not really, and some other things. But I was able to catch up and to run with them as well. And it was great to be challenged in those ways. And then the same thing when I went into graduate school. because a number of people in the physics graduate school there had been focusing on just the science classes for their undergraduate work while I've been doing all these other crazy things. I was again behind, and so it was a bit tough to struggle through quantum mechanics. I never loved that subject, but I loved some of the other subjects in there, and just learning the fundamentals of how science works with a physics degree. And so yeah, it was at times a bit of a struggle just because we didn't have quite as many resources in some senses, but we had the competitive spirit, and that was really important.
Well, you're a bit of a Renaissance man then. So you've got the science background and a little humanities with singing in the choir. Do you still sing?
Oh yes, yeah. I was just singing on Sunday. Yep.
Really? So you sing with your church group
Yep.
every Sunday?
Yes, I was.
Very nice. Leading in so many ways. You were talking a bit about your experiences from Mountain Lake to Chicago to Minneapolis and beyond, and the successes. What type of adversity have you had to overcome? What are some, life's not fair moments that you had to get over? Or maybe your door closed and you had to be patient and persevere and wait for another door to open and then be ready when that door opened to walk through. I mean, life's not, I know you said earlier that things have kind of fallen on your lap, but you kind of, when those doors open, you've been ready and prepared and you hit it. So are there any moments where you went, got it? And that you had, that things weren't fair, that we all kind of have had. So maybe if you could explain some of them.
Yeah, Dan. I mean, nothing ever goes always easily, especially when you're in the public eye and or leading things. And so I think one of the let's see. I mean, there's several that pop up in my book, Red Rover. One is that there was a natural occurrence that, or maybe unnatural occurrence that really was a big impact in more ways than one, and that was the crash of our first spacecraft that I was heavily involved in, and that was a mission that NASA named Genesis, and it was the first robotic spacecraft to ever come back to Earth from beyond the moon. So that was happening in 2004, 15 years ago now. And I had been very involved in that mission for the last dozen years. And it was supposed to bring back samples of solar wind, this material that is streaming outward from the sun. It had been out a million miles ahead of the Earth, collecting these materials for 2.5 years. It was time to bring it back. And it was supposed to parachute down, and a helicopter was going to snatch it before it even got to the ground. And the parachutes failed to deploy. There had been an error in the engineering. And so this thing crashed to the ground. And I was in front of a room of VIPs and camera people from all the networks. And so it was a big deal, to say the least. All the major networks cut to this this proving ground in Utah where the landing was happening, and I was in front of 20 microphones to try to tell about this big NASA disaster. Only, of course, we didn't want to tell it that way. We knew we had the samples and some other things. The samples were eventually analyzed. They were broken, but we were able to analyze them. And so I didn't give the networks their sob story that they wanted that day, but it was quite an experience. I mean, other adversity, I think the harder kind are the kind that are human related in many senses, and politics so often plays such a big role in what we do with big sums of money. And that's what we use, of course, and it's the public's money, so I take that very seriously. But on the ChemCam mission, or the ChemCam project, which is for the Curiosity rover mission, that project started in about 2004, but we and the mission was launched in 2012. But about halfway through our development period of that instrument, in fact, we were more than halfway through. we were running a little bit over budget. It turns out that some of the other instruments were running much more over budget, but we were not a NASA center here in New Mexico, not at Jet Propulsion Laboratory or a different NASA center. And so we were made the scapegoat in a sense. And so NASA decided they were going to use us as an example, and they announced they were canceling any further funding for our instrument. And so here I was, the leader of this instrument, and I almost want to say there was nothing to do but pray. But yeah, we did do a lot on the political side, trying to do letter writing campaigns and other things. But I just didn't know what was going to happen. I literally did pray and take each day at a time. And about 2.5 months into this cancellation, just kind of going one step at a time, going very slowly, just because we didn't have much money left and just didn't know the future, sort of half preparing to shut down entirely, we got reinstated. And that was still a bit of a rocky road, but it was a very tough time. I just did feel like something good was going to happen out of it. Just didn't know what it was going to be, but we did get reinstated, and the ChemCam instrument went on to become one of the phenomena, technically, of that mission, such that I'm the only person who was leading another instrument on the next generation of the rovers from that generation of instrument leads. So yes, it was quite a time. And we've had many other times like that when people when the politics puts you down. But I just pray and move ahead.
Yeah, whether it's politics or just life in general, sometimes you just have to survive and then wait for the opportunity to thrive again, which you have. So does the ChemCam that evolved into the SuperCam, and that's what you have behind you there?
Yes.
For the Perseverance?
Yes. That's right. So after the landing of 2012 with Curiosity, and we've been driving around with that rover and shooting up the rocks with our laser, NASA announced that they liked it so much they wanted to do another big rover mission to Mars, and set to they put a science definition team together to try to decide or help decide what that rover should do. That team did not have people from our instrument team on board, and so they kind of said, well, ChemCam does chemistry, but we want a remote sensing instrument that'll do mineralogy for our next rover. And I think maybe they thought they'd gotten rid of us. So we put our heads together and tried to decide how we could work on a mineralogy instrument going from the heritage of ChemCam. And so we had been working on another laser technique that would give us the mineral composition. By the way, minerals give us one piece of information, chemistry gives us another information. They're very complementary. Like if you know something's made of carbon, that can be useful, but you may not know if it's a diamond, like this ring, or if it's a graphite, like you use in a pencil. That's very different. So the chemical composition and the mineral composition are important, but this study group had focused on mineral composition. So we had to show that we would do that for the next mission. So we took this other laser technique and said, well, let's try to do both what ChemCam does with its elemental composition studies with one laser technique that kind of blasts the rocks, and this other laser technique that will give us the mineral composition. And besides that, let's give it an infrared vision that gives it some other identification of minerals as well. So we put two mineral composition detection instruments effectively into our what we were going to build. And then we were fished around a lot for the name, and we started calling it SuperCam just because it was a successor to ChemCam. Nobody really liked the name. My French colleagues, who are, if you know the French culture, they're very into cartoons, and they started making, pictures of the rover with the big S on the front and so on. But anyway, the name stuck, but we didn't figure out a better name. So here we are with SuperCam, and it's doing well. Of course, I'm biased, but it's doing a super job. It is telling us about the mineral content as well as the chemistry, and it's one of the most used instruments on the Perseverance rover that is now running around in Jezero crater on Mars.
So, what's in layman's terms? What's the science in practical terms? What's happening? So you have this laser blows up, vaporizes this rock, got a bunch of particles, and you have cameras that and other type of instruments that then collect data and send it back, and then we learn.
Yeah.
What exactly?
So first of all, starting with the ChemCam technique, which is uses a technique that is called laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. It's a breakdown of the atoms or of the molecules, actually. And so we call it LIBS for short, LIBS. And this LIBS technique uses a pulsed laser. The laser is only firing for about 5 billionths of a second. And so what I tell the public is basically we use the instantaneous power that you could use to light 1 million light bulbs, but we only do it for 5 billionths of a second, so it doesn't take very many watts. And we focus it down to a spot the size of a pinhead. And so it's a very high power density. And that basically ablates some material flying out at very high temperature. And so it creates a little flash. And we use the kind of Cyclops eye at the top of the rover. That's our telescope, and we collect some of the light with the same telescope that projects that laser light out, and put it into some optical spectrometers that look at the color spectrum of that light, and we can see different atomic emission peaks where we can identify the different atoms that are in that hot material that we just ablated, whether it's calcium or silicon or iron or magnesium, things like that. And so by calibrating that, we can actually give the composition of the rocks and the soils around this rover. Nobody had done that in this kind of context before, and so it was very revolutionary. And so we did that, and we've been doing that. We've shot almost 1 million shots with the laser on Mars now. And then for the other technique, we actually don't focus the laser beam down. We use a green laser, and we sort of tickle the surface for those 5 billionths of a second. It's not as violent a laser burst, you could say. And so that actually causes the molecules to vibrate. Most of the light that comes back is this brilliant green, just like the laser beam itself. But a little bit of the light actually is different colors changed by the vibration frequency of the molecules on the surface. We call that Raman spectroscopy after the scientist in India who invented the technique. And so that tells us some of the mineral content. And then the infrared vision that I mentioned also gives us, by the different infrared bands that we have, some of the mineral content as well. So we're looking for clay minerals in particular, but we want to identify, right now, we're in an igneous area in this crater. This crater was once a lake, but somehow there were lava flows down there earlier. And so we're looking at a lake that had a river flowing into it. We have a river delta. We can see the geology of that river delta. And there are a number of other instruments along with SuperCam on the rover. And then its main purpose, actually, is to collect samples that will eventually be brought back to Earth. So we're exploring the area. We're finding out the science of that area. We're finding that it was very habitable, that there was a lake there and the river. In the lake water, we could have drank that lake water. It was fresh water. And so organisms could have lived there. And by looking for organic materials, we could find out whether there might have been some kind of life there. It would have been certainly single-celled, very primitive life, not anything with bones or anything like that. But trying to find that out and then bringing samples back to even give us more techniques that are on Earth that we can use for this study of our sister planet Mars.
So what do you think? Will humans be able to live on Mars one day?
Yeah, that's certainly possible. And but it's not an easy thing or a very fun thing to think about in the short term, just because that's a tough place now. So it was probably quite habitable way back a long time ago. We're talking several billion years ago, when it had a thicker atmosphere, but now it's got a very thin atmosphere. It's got only 1% as thick an atmosphere as the Earth. It's all carbon dioxide. And so people would have to make oxygen to breathe there. This rover Perseverance actually has an instrument called MOXIE that is producing oxygen as a demonstration for that. So that's another step. But it's going to be a long time before we can get people there and have the hardware to bring people back. And so the idea is first to bring these small samples back from this Perseverance mission so that we can do a round trip and then start thinking bigger towards humans.
You've obviously been a real leader in robotic space exploration. I noted you're saying in your book, if humans are the dreamers for space exploration, the pioneers are the robots. Maybe give us some context here. Where are we going? I know we've had some man-made missions that are going to the moon, to the space station, other places. Obviously, we have some success with robots. Where do you think we're going with space exploration? What are some of the next phases we're seeing?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're doing a lot with robotics, and I think maybe people didn't realize how much we're doing with robots out in space, just because a lot of times the focus is on the human exploration. But humans have never been out of Earth orbit except for those a few Apollo missions to the moon. That may start happening again with humans. But in the meantime, yes, these robots, these rovers and other types of missions have been doing the bulk of our real exploration.
When you started your career, there was no SpaceX, there's no Blue Origin. What's the impact of private resources on space exploration?
Oh, great question, Dan. I don't think we know exactly where that's going to take us. But I mean, over time, private industry has done a lot with the development of satellites for all of the different things we use satellites for: communications, for imagery, and now it's getting more into the public eye just because of the some of the billionaires that are enticing us. And so here in New Mexico, we have Virgin Galactic. So it's going to be space tourism is going to be an industry in the future, and so we're going into uncharted territory. Whether that goes to not just people going up and coming right back down, but going into orbit eventually as a commercial business is something that we will see. The other thing is that human space and space in general is becoming very international. I've talked about our European partners, even just on our one instrument or two instruments, but the Chinese are getting very involved in space and starting to spend on the order of the same as NASA. And so that is, we're going to see Chinese going potentially with humans to the moon in the not too distant future as well. And so we'll just have to see how that goes, whether that starts a new sort of human space race where humans are doing other things, going to nearby asteroids. We'll have to see. But some of that is going to be using commercial as well. And so I think those two are going to start coming together.
You're not just a scientist in many ways with your relationships with our European partners. You've been an effective diplomat and I guess an informal ambassador. In the military context, we like to talk about coalition building, the importance of multilateral operations. You've obviously lived it. Your leadership, your relationships, obvious success you've had demonstrates how such international commitment can drive positive results and success for missions, and that's wonderful. And I think that's this great tribute to you. I love that the French government saw it, recognized it, and we kind of laughed about it earlier, but you were awarded with the title of Knight for recognizing you for your work and significant contributions to science and inspiring many young ambitious Earthlings. To pursue a career in space. If I guess maybe talk a little bit about the relationships, how that evolved, how that originated, and what's it like to be a knight as well? Do people call you Sir Roger?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Actually, I laugh because being near Texas in the South here, there are a lot of people that talk about sir and ma'am, but that's a little bit different. Yeah. So the international collaboration came about. I was here just getting started in New Mexico at this national laboratory. And we had a postdoctoral researcher who came from France to work with a colleague here. He worked for 2 years here, and then he went back to France. But he came back on a visit about a year later, and I'd gotten to know and befriend him. And this friend, Sylvestre Maurice, came back and asked me what I was working on and what projects I was looking to for the future. I was working on Genesis at that time, the mission, but I was starting to look into the LIBS technique that we are now using for ChemCam and SuperCam. And so I told him about it, and he said, and I said, would you like to collaborate on this? He took it to France and put in a proposal to the French Space Agency, and they loved the idea. I mean, I think the French have a flair for things that are artistic too, not just scientific. And they saw both in this thing. That uses a laser gun and zaps rocks. And so they just went to town with the idea, and they said, we want to develop a laser. And the lasers we've been using actually are French. And so we started to work together on proposals for NASA missions. And it's it's been a friendship that has lasted now for a couple of decades. And we talk to each other every day. In fact, during this podcast, he was actually trying to call me on the phone, and so that's the way it worked. And it's been just a great camaraderie. They love coming here and interacting with the U.S. scientists, and we love going there. They're a very space-focused nation. And so because of that, they are able to think towards awards for people who are working with their teams. Now the Knight title took me totally by surprise, of course, as did the asteroid. But anyway, the people think, well, I probably went to Paris and got, I had the sword on the shoulder or something like that. No, this is a modern thing. And if you want to get a lot of French people to go and to attend some ceremony, you don't want to do it in Paris because they're used to that place. So we did it in Hollywood, in Brentwood. And so we did it at the French attaché's mansion in Brentwood. And so we got all the French people to come for a meeting in Caltech. And then, and besides, we'll have this special party on Friday night, and in Brentwood. And in fact, it was a very surprising night because the president was having a party some blocks over. So it was very special. But so we came dressed up, got that whole thing together, gave our speeches, got the pin and the award, and had a nice party together. And it was just great to have such an excuse for a party. And in fact, my wife and I arranged, when you do something like that, you want to sail off into the sunset, right? So we said, okay, we'll take a cruise. So we actually did a 3-day cruise on a commercial cruise line right after that to celebrate my wife and I. So it was fun.
That's fabulous, and thank you for that, and congratulations. And it's something that is wonderful that the French recognize that, because that's that. Forging a ties between the two scientific communities is obviously important. I was looking at some of the recent presentations you've given, and I really like the title of one you called "Night with a Nerd" that you talked about. My wife really liked that. She has a T-shirt that reads "Nerdy by Nature," off that, but then she just loves it. But I guess I was just thinking when I read that, I was just thinking, in the context of this French relationship and your award, it's not just Night with a Nerd anymore. It's going to be Night with a Knight. It could be a good double.
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
I think that's pretty neat. I was just thinking that. But anyway, congratulations. You mentioned the asteroid earlier. How did that come about? How do you have an asteroid named 41795 Wiens?
Yeah, well, it helps to have friends who have friends in the International Astronomical Union, which is the one that names the asteroids. And so one of my colleagues, it turns out another French colleague, had a friend who is in the IAU, so they proposed the names of both my colleague Sylvestre, my French colleague, and myself and I think there was already an asteroid named Maurice, but none named Wiens, and so we got one named Wiens. I still need to look at when it is having its close approach to Earth and start putting that on Facebook and celebrating. And
I'll celebrate with you. That's cool. Just don't use that number, I guess, for your banking password or something like that. For one, could be a zip code.
Don't tell people.
Yeah. You chatted about your wife earlier, and no one can be an accomplished person without having a spouse like you've had supporting you, working with you, leading with you. You remarked in your book, your wife Gwen climbed into the gondola and took off with you. Sounds like a bit of a nice story together. How you just talk a little about your love story, how you guys met, and how she supported you, and so you guys have supported each other, and maybe a couple of stories about the importance of her in your life.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for mentioning that. It's it is very important. Yeah, so we got together in Minnesota. We had been attending a church in downtown Minneapolis, Bethlehem Baptist, and so we got to know each other there, and I could tell, even though she wasn't in the sciences for her career and subject matter, she was very interested in intellectual things, and so we had a bond together. And so one of the things that we did a lot of talking, of course, in our first year of getting to know each other. And one of the things she said was, my bucket list, and talking about this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things she said was, I'd love to go flying balloons sometime. And so I kept that in mind, and I also knew that I wanted our engagement to be something special. And so I arranged with a hot air balloon company. There's very few in Minnesota, and maybe more now, but at least at that time. And so I found a company and arranged with them. I'd never been up in a balloon. I wanted to do it too sometime. And so I kept it a secret to her and said, we're going to go on an adventure. Early morning, wear a hat, because you have the propane burner above you, so you have to keep your hair from getting singed. And so she was very intrigued about what this would be, and so we I picked her up very early one morning, and we drove out to near the St. Croix River in the Mississippi, and here was this place full of open field full of balloons that were starting to get inflated. She just thought we were going to watch, but then when they were fully inflated, then they told us to get in, and we did. And so we went up in the balloon, and I had a poem that I had composed, and I proposed to her. So that was our engagement, and so it was very special. We have actually not been in a hot air balloon since, but being in New Mexico, there are a lot of hot air balloons. We've been at some festivals watching them go up. But, and she's been a very special supporter. I don't know what else to say except that I could never do this without her.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's fabulous. I love it. Give her a big hello. What a journey! What a journey she's been on. The two of you have been on, and have seen and done a lot. I guess just to close here, I'd like to talk a little bit about dreams. You've spoken and written about pursuing one's dreams. So many kids have dreams, and obviously that's awesome. We want that. We want to encourage that. We all need dreams, but the reality is, for lots of us, unfortunately, dreams don't always come true the way you had it. But here you are. You've had a NASA. Here you are, a NASA success story. When you were young, you loved space exploration. You dreamed to be an inventor and explore into space. How did your dreams come true, and what can we take from your life to help others to maybe to help navigate their lives to achieve their dreams?
I think each of us has a God-given path in front of us, and I think it's our job to find that, to pray about that, to work to understand it, and to do our best. And not every one of those paths is a hugely public one. Every person is important in our society, and I think that's one of the things that we have to realize. And had these dreams not been come true, or had they not been the same dreams, or anything like that, I think that my life would not have been any less important. And so that's, I think, what we all have to understand is that we as individuals are very important. And that's, I think that's sort of an eternal perspective and a societal perspective that we need to have. And so I would say, to each person that you should work at it, you should pray and find that dream and pursue it. And there will be failures along the way. And those failures are part of the overall plan, actually, because I think Minnesotans are probably better at understanding this maybe than some other people, but that the failures do make us better people as a result. And so all of that is important. But I do think it is helpful and great to dream big, and to see what we can accomplish through with the help of everyone else around us, with God's help.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. How's the next generation of space dreamers, of the next generation of Roger Wienses, that talent looking? I mean, what's our bench look like for science and space exploration?
Yeah, I'm really encouraged because I see a lot of people that are up and coming, and I actually, a lot of people come to me privately or say, my kid or grandkid wants to talk to you, and it's a very encouraging thing to know that they want to do great things, they want to do big things, but they're also willing to live in the trenches and to do whatever is asked of them, and so that's I think. We've got a great thing coming. We need to, as a nation, as a society, continue to work on science and in mathematics and sort of STEM topics as a background. But we need to be well-rounded, and so I encourage that to everybody, that we want to be both creative and analytical, that we want to be artistic and scientific. And so I think the more we can do with both sides of our brains, the better we're going to be as a society, and to stay away from the other things that would be a short-term enjoyment or satisfaction, but look to the long term as a society.
Last question: what do you miss the most about Cottonwood County, about Mountain Lake?
It's such a great place, Dan, when I think about my growing up years there, they were so golden, that I had so many advantages there, and so it's a great place for families. It's a great place to challenge each other and learn. As far as I can tell, the schools are still excellent, and there's I think there's a lot of encouragement. There is sort of I think an attitude that really people can make it to doing many different things, whether you stay there or whether you go elsewhere. And I think that attitude is something that is really important. And people just don't have the same thing everywhere. So it is a special place.
Well, thank you for that, Roger, and thank you for your time today. Thank you for the many contributions you've provided to our nation, to science as a whole, and obviously inspiring our next generation of leaders. So
I have one more note, and that is I remembered where Tony Nelson is from, and it's Laverne.
Yes.
Laverne, and so I think all of this part of the state and in Minnesota has just been a great place to be from and to grow up and to be and a great place to come back to if you don't still live there. So yes,
I couldn't agree more, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so in love with this project, to try to allow people to showcase the roads they've taken, whether they're living in Cottonwood County now, or they're from there, or if they've transited there. A place that has had a wonderful impact on many, and allow people to kind of share their stories, their roads. So thank you, Roger. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
All right. We'll talk again soon. Dan Keeker here. Thank you for listening to this episode of the All Roads Podcast, my thought-provoking conversation with Dr. Roger Wiens. I'm always looking for more interesting, talented people to share their journeys. If you have any recommendations, please email me, Dan Keeker, at allroads@dankeeker.com. That's spelled DANKUECKER.com. That email address again, allroads@dankeeker.com. Until then, make the most of this and every day. Go travel your road with a purpose and a smile.